Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow with me, your host, Alistair McConnachie, broadcasting on our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and around the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday evening from 7 to 8 p.m. Welcome to everybody coming in on our digital platforms, to people on TikTok, to people on Facebook, to people on YouTube, and to people on Twitter. And as we always say, the best experience is to be had on YouTube. So if you're watching on TikTok and you want to see the comments and you want to see everything else, please go to youtube.com/UK A Force for Good. Good evening to Debbie, who is the first in today, and also to Frankie. Good evening to you, Frankie, and Adam. Good evening to Adam. Adam came up with a great phrase last week, which we even used to describe the show when we published it. Harry Brown says, good evening to all unionists, and to Robert. Good evening to you, Robert, and to Mark. Thanks for your comments on Facebook this afternoon, Mark, and also to Peter Morris, who says, evening all, and to Kenny from East Kilbride, and to Stephen. Hi all. So yes, the last week Adam came up with a very good phrase, which we're going to run along the bottom there. United as one, divided by none. Love that. Love that. That's really good. That's really good. Thanks for that, and we put that out on TikTok as well, that phrase. That's a good one. Frankie says, proud to be both Scottish and British. And Adam's got a question there. He asks, how do I react to the Jamaican Prime Minister saying that his country intends to be independent when it already has been for decades? Don't know much about that, haven't been following that. Seems a rather strange thing for him to be saying. But talking about Jamaica, they've got the Jamaican regiment, and I was doing some research this afternoon, and the Jamaican regiment have actually been on guard at Buckingham Palace. It was back in 2007, I think, because it was actually Mark on the Facebook comments who said, wouldn't it be a good idea if Commonwealth Realm countries sent a small detachment from one of the regiments every year over to the United Kingdom to act as the Queen's Guard? Wouldn't that be a good way of just some inter-Commonwealth, British Commonwealth action there? And it was a really good idea, and so I looked into it on Wikipedia, and indeed that has happened in the past, not as often as we'd quite like. At the moment, today, the reason I was researching that today was because I saw that the Gibraltar regiment is doing guard duty in London for the next few days. So I thought that was a really nice wee kind of bit of British international culture going on there. And we need to do more of that as well. You know, we don't want to, all these Caribbean countries and so on, we should be finding ways of trading and making sure that they benefit from that British regal relationship. You know, they should be really making an effort to cultivate what we call the British wealth that we have in common. Used to be officially called the British Commonwealth, but there's still a British wealth that we have in common, and we should be cultivating that worldwide. You know, that's what we're good at. We should be doing a lot more of that sort of thing. Good evening to you, Tommy. Good evening. Now, it's been a really, really good week here at A Force for Good, because some of you will know, because some of you were there, we had our 10th anniversary celebration at a venue in the centre of Glasgow on Saturday, and there was 50 people there. We had a really good time, very enjoyable time, with a lot of like-minded people who had come from as far away as Aberdeen, and somebody had come up from England as well. So it was a really good event, and we cut a cake which, to celebrate the 10 years, we have a picture of that. And it was, there it is, there's the cake there, with Her Majesty the Queen actually graced us as well, and she stood there until the cake was eaten. So that was good. I gave a talk, and also our other director Ronnie gave a couple of good speeches, and we've got a picture of that as well. There's Ronnie holding forth in his inimitable way, and made a very good and important speech about the importance of a force for good, the work that we've done for 10 years, and the importance of continuing on that work as well for the next 10 years, because the situation that we've got here in Scotland is not going away. I was also delighted in my capacity as director to receive for the organisation a metallic plaque that one of our supporters had put together, and that was really good as well. There it is, United Kingdom, a force for good, established 2012. It's now 2022. Okay, and you know, it wasn't just meeting and greeting people and having a buffet and presentations to members of our team, but we also launched our magazine, our issue 5 of Union Heart, which is a 20-pager, which is now available, and it's here. Look at that, 10 years strong. And that is essentially our history. What we do in these 20 pages is we take it from the very beginning in 2012, when we say something must be done. And it's like a page per year. 2013, 2014, We Save Scotland. 2015, lobbying the legislators. 2016, our second stage of growth. 2017, we changed the dynamic. Going on to 2018, 2 pages in 2019, because that was a busy, action-packed year. 2020 was also very busy as well. That's us outside the BBC studios calling for us to switch off Sturgeon. And then 2021 was a good year. 2022, and what we do in this page 2022 is we list all the Scottish nationalist marches, all the ones that we've counted, and even the ones that we haven't counted down there at the bottom, and we give the precise figures, and we look to the next 10 years. And there's a commemoration here to one of our founding directors, Alan Robertson, who sadly passed away back in February 2020. So that's a really colourful magazine, and that's free to anybody who is a monthly donor. So if you're a monthly donor, if you're one of our union supporters, then please do just request it, and we will send it in the post to you. And if you want another couple of copies, whatever, request those as well. If you're not a union supporter, please do consider becoming one. And you get lots of little freebies like that as well, and you get invites to some of our events and all that sort of stuff. So it's worth becoming a union supporter. If you don't want to become a union supporter but you want this anyway, you can find this in our shop for a £5. And we also in our shop, we have all 5 back issues for £12. That's a pretty good deal. In fact, we had a picture there of our back issues, and you can see just how good they look. There you go. Look at that. Our back issues, all 5 of them. Great stuff. You can get all them for £12 via the link, which you'll find in the comments there. Good evening to you, Nelson. As Stephen says, from little acorns, great oak trees grow. Okay. So, yeah, the next 10 years, and let's just have a wee look at that at the moment, actually, because we look at that and we look at how it can unfold, how the next 5 to 10 years are going to unfold, and we explain it in our very brief, concise way just there in that column. But we conclude that it all depends, of course, on who's going to win the next British general election, which will be in May 2024, and then what happens in 2026 at a Scottish election, which is dependent, of course, upon who's won the 2024 one. So the point of the matter is it's not going away, and we're going to use this time to best effect, because the Scottish nationalists and their supporters in the media will simply be using this time to seed disaffection and to destabilise the United Kingdom. So we've got to keep the British end up, as we always like to say, James Bond style. But in that regard, we've got to be careful about the language that we use to describe the potential of there being another referendum to keep the United Kingdom together. Because I was looking at this Scotsman front page from Friday the 18th of March, which somebody gave me on the 19th at the event that we were at, and just majority want Indy Ref 2 talk stopped amid Ukraine crisis. And I was reading this article and I thought to myself, all it's talking about there is this phrase, Indy Ref 2, okay? And all that's doing is just making you think about the words independence referendum. A referendum on that matter isn't, as we always say, about Scotland becoming independent. It's about the people voting to hold the United Kingdom together. It's about the people voting for Scotland to stay a member of the United Kingdom. And it's about people voting to stop Britain being broken up, okay? But that phrase, Indy Ref 2, it frames everything from the perspective of the Scottish nationalist who wants to destroy Scotland. So it completely avoids the big British picture. It completely avoids the fact that the majority of us will vote to keep the UK together. It avoids the fact that the majority of us will vote to ensure that Scotland stays a member of the United Kingdom. It ignores the fact that at such a referendum, a majority of us will be voting to keep the UK together and not to have it broken up. So how do you put all of that into a little 4-syllable phrase like Indy Ref 2? Okay, how do you frame it from our perspective? So I was thinking about that, and look at the word Indy, right? 2 syllables. So we've got UK, which is 2 syllables. We've got GB, which is 2 syllables. We've got Britain, which is 2 syllables. We've got Union, which is 2 syllables. So maybe we should, instead of talking about the Indy Ref 2, we should talk about Union Ref 2, or Britain Ref 2, or GB Ref 2, or my personal favourite, which is just simply UK Ref 2, because it's a referendum about the future of the United Kingdom. And that phrase UK Ref 2 puts UK the central state issue at the heart of the matter. So that's what we're going to start doing now. We're not going to talk about a potential Indy Ref 2. We're going to talk, if we talk about it at all, as a potential UK Ref 2. And moreover, in this article, when you're reading it, constantly it's talking about independence referendum. Independence referendum. Independence referendum, mentioned about 3 or 4 times in that article. Well, think about it. Remember when we had the European Union membership referendum? Okay. Think how differently that was framed. It wasn't the UK independence referendum. You could have argued it was a UK independence referendum. It was for Britain to leave the EU, so you could talk about it being a UK independence referendum, but nobody did. The media didn't. Instead, they called it the EU membership referendum. It put the emphasis on remaining a member of the EU. So everybody's mind was focused on, do we stay a member of the EU, because of the way that it was described, which, well, while it didn't work out for the Remainers, it still framed it with the EU at heart. So maybe we should, instead of talking about a Scottish independence referendum, we should start talking about the UK membership referendum, because that's what it would be for Scottish people. It would be about a referendum on whether or not we stay a member of the UK. So maybe that's another way of framing it. Maybe that's a better way of framing it. The UK membership referendum. UK Ref 2. Just a thought that I'm putting out there. And if it does nothing else, then it helps us to realise the importance of how the way we describe something contributes to the way that we understand it, and consequently the way that we act as a result of that understanding. Well, Adam makes a point. Well, yes, Adam, I totally get that. Why would we call Scotland a member of the UK when the UK is not like the EU? The UK is a nation. Yes, I understand that. I'm just trying to think of ways in which to counter the phrase Scottish independence referendum, when in fact that phrase does not properly describe what's at stake. But I totally understand that it's not an ideal phrase, UK membership referendum, but it's perhaps better than Scottish independence referendum. I don't know. It's still in the beta testing stage, that one. And we'll have a quiz coming up at the bottom of the hour, and the quiz will be for this Union Jack tin of sweeties. And all you need to do is to send the answer to our email, which is there on the screen, contact@aforceforgood.uk, and the first person with the right answer will get one of those tins of sweeties winging the way. That's coming up at 7:25. Okay. Nelson says, spot on, UK referendum, it's all stacked in favour of the Scottish Republican separatists. Yeah. And of course Paul says, and I totally agree, best try not to talk about any referendum because it just plays into their hands. That's right. Very often though it's almost impossible to avoid, but you're quite right, Paul. It's best if we just don't talk about that, and in fact concentrate on what you're very good at yourself, Paul, which is talking up the United Kingdom, talking up the value of the United Kingdom, so that people come through time to understand the value of it. And I'm going to be talking about that and the value, understanding the value of the United Kingdom, when I talk about busting Indy myths, which will be coming up after the competition. Busting Indy myths this this week is about whether or not is the nationalists always go, oh, if we're independent, you can still be British. Aye, right. Let's see how that works out. That's what we'll be busting. That's the Indy myth we'll be busting. See, there I said again, Indy myth. You have to use the phrase to a certain extent and try not to overdo it. Paul from Inverness, he says, have sympathy, my MP is Ian Blackford. I'm sorry to hear that, Paul. Okay, now, on this day in British history, let's talk about that. Now, we talk about on this day in British history because British history matters. Okay, British history matters. And this is something that we develop across all our social media platforms, is a little factoid on this day, every day, on our Instagram and on our Twitter often and on our Facebook every day. Because this is knowledge that roots us substantially in the past. It enables us to understand and appreciate how we got to where we are, who we are, and as a consequence of that, where we're going. As the very first paragraph in our little book here, We Book for the Union, says, those of us who love the United Kingdom have a narrative, an overall national story within which we understand ourselves and make our case, which tells us who we are, where we have come from, and where we are heading. Get your wee book, folks. It does keep us going. So, what happened on this day? Well, on this day in British history, a man passed away. A man called Ensign Ewart. Okay, and he's got. We'll just bring up a picture of Ensign Ewart there. He is. He's a famous chap, and I'm just going to talk about him just now. If you just bear with me, because I've just got to find this thing, and I'll tell you all about Ensign Ewart. Sorry, mate, I thought that it was already in my documents, but it's not. Been very busy today, actually, doing various things. So, some of you will have seen his gravestone, though, but he was a warrior of the absolute First Order. A warrior of the First Order, and he was a soldier in the Royal North British Dragoons. Okay, what a fantastic name that is. The Royal North British Dragoons. And he became renowned throughout the United Kingdom for capturing the regimental eagle of the French 45th Regiment at the Battle of Waterloo, and he died this day back in 1846. And the painting that we put up there is called the Battle of Waterloo, the charge of the 2nd Brigade of Cavalry, and it shows Ewart in the heat of the action, and he recounted his struggle with the French in these terms. Okay, he says, one made a thrust at my groin. I parried him off and cut him down through the head. A lancer came at me. I threw the lance off by my right side and cut him through the chin and upwards through the teeth. Next, a foot soldier fired at me and then charged me with his bayonet, which I also had the good luck to parry, and then I cut him down through the head. Okay. So he doesn't appear to have been one for post-traumatic stress disorder anyway. I think he just liked giving other people post-traumatic stress disorder with his recollections. Anyway, so he was given a commission as an ensign, which is equivalent to a second lieutenant. And he left the army in 1821. So he moved to Salford, where he taught swordsmanship very appropriately, and he lived out the rest of his days on his army pension. But when he died, he was buried in a graveyard in Salford, which was concreted over, and it wasn't until 1938 that workmen found his grave. So what they did was they exhumed him and they reburied him under a very large granite memorial, which is on the esplanade of Edinburgh Castle, and we've got a picture of that. Many of you will have seen it. That's Ensign Ewart who is there. And what does that say there? Can I read it? It says, "At Waterloo as sergeant in the Royal North British Dragoons, wahey, he captured the standard of the French 45th Regiment, from which the Eagle badge, now worn by the Royal Scots Greys, is derived. Erected to his memory in April 1938 by the officers, warrant officers and commissioned officers and men, past and present, of the Royal Scots Greys." Okay, so that was Ensign Ewart, who passed away on this day, having fought at the Battle of Waterloo. Good, and there's another thing not happening today, but it's happening tomorrow, and that's the 24th of March, which was the day in 1603 that the crowns of Scotland and England became united in the person of the Scots King James VI. And that's a big day actually in British Unionist history. And it's ever since that day that we've had one monarch in the British Isles, because previously you had a King or Queen of England or a King or Queen of Scots, and it was on 24th of March 1603 that we had the union of the crowns. And we did a wee video, just a 2-minute video. We did this, and we're just going to run this for you, see how you like this. Wonderful. You know, we have such an excellent video editor that put that together. I just want to say thank you. That's a really good video. And what we'll do tomorrow, we'll put that out on Twitter, we'll put that out on Facebook, we'll put it out on TikTok, and it just helps people to remember significant dates in British history. And everything that James VI said there is still so true today, doubly more so even than in his day. He was the one who began really the serious thought that Scotland and England could be politically united, or at least back in those days to do more together, if not during his reign to actually unite, but to do more together, which is what creates nations, communities and families. John liked it. Thank you, John. Hello to you, Kaylin. So, the question which I have, okay, for this tin, which will be winging its way to you if you're the first person to get it right, and if you haven't done this before, there's a good chance that you'll win it, because all you have to do is send an email to contact@aforceforgood.uk, and the question to send to that address is, on this day, on the 23rd of March 1846, Ensign Ewart passed away. He was famous for capturing the French standard at which battle? Okay, at which battle did Ensign Ewart create his bravery, his act of bravery? Do his act of bravery. Okay. And we will announce the winner of that at the top of the hour. And as I say, if you haven't done it before, or if you've done it before, do it again, and you might be lucky. Okay. So what I want to talk about now, well, while we're still on the subject of British history, I've been invited to a focus group run by Edinburgh City Council on the subject of, to Edinburgh City Council, to Edinburgh City Council, but it's a focus group online, and it's looking at the question of empire, slavery, and Scotland's museums. And I filled in one of their questionnaires back in autumn of last year, and they've invited me to join their focus group, which I'm very pleased about, and I look forward to doing that. And so I've registered for it. Tell you all about it when it happens, but it's on the subject of empire, slavery, and Scotland's museums, and it's part of, I'm not really going to say too much about it, but all these big cities now are doing an audit of all their statues and street names and all sorts of things like that. And Glasgow City Council have released their audit. It's called Glasgow Slavery and Atlantic Commerce, an audit of historic connections and modern legacies. And it's 119 pages. I've read the first 30 pages. I read the first 30 pages yesterday. I have to say, it's actually very interesting, of course. It's very interesting. But the only criticism I would have of it is you get the impression it's like you get the impression that they've got it in for everybody that was involved in that, they're making as if it's like a wrong thing, as if it was wrong for them to have been involved in it, when in fact it was just how society was back then. But what they also do is they seem to be having a go at people who inherited wealth, so if your great-grandfather inherited wealth because he made money off the tobacco industry, or he made money in the sugar merchant trade or something, then if you're like the grandson, like your you're to blame as well, even though you've inherited it like 2-3 generations down. So I don't think that's a right thing to do. I think that's kind of morally iffy, quite frankly, to hold the sons responsible for the so-called sins of the father. I'm not sure about that at all from a moral perspective, but it's certainly an interesting study, and this is what the system can do. They've obviously paid somebody to sit and do all of that, which must have been quite good fun for him. And he's brought out a lot of interesting stuff there, which no doubt we'll hear more about. But I want to make sure that if I'm in the focus group, I'll be like saying, it's not something you should be bothering about too much, because we're all agreed that slavery was wrong, but Britain has repented in blood for that. Thousands of sailors in the Royal Navy, African squadron perished to keep slavery off the high seas, and we should have a monument to their memory. That's one of the things I'm going to be promoting at this focus group, is the importance of remembering the British sailors who died enforcing the ban on slave trading, or what they're calling trafficking. Yes, so continuing on those sorts of matters, let's talk about busting Indy myths now, okay? Part of our ongoing series, Busting Indy Myths. Busting Indy Myths, Part 9. And in this Busting Indy Myths, we're going to look at the oft-heard Scottish nationalist claim that if Scotland was independent, you can still be British. Oh, what are you worried about? You can still be British after separation. Why? Well, because Scotland and England are still going to be on the same island, and the island's called Britain, and so if you live on the island, you're British, so you'll still be British. And I'm like, oh, I'm well aware, okay, that Scotland and England will still be sitting on the same tectonic plate of the Earth's crust. I'm well aware they're not going to part ways. I'm well aware Scotland's not going to drift off on a tectonic plate over the North Pole. Okay, I'm well aware that we'll still be living on the same island, but you know what, mate? This isn't a matter of geology. It's not even a matter of geography. This is a debate about politics and about identity and about culture. And it is in those matters where we'll not be able to be British. Because, as we always say, Britain is a nation. It's a living organism with interlinking bones and muscles and blood vessels which make up the body and soul of the nation, and which can't be separated politically without traumatizing those social and cultural blood vessels. And of course, most Scottish nationalists don't conceive of Britain in that way. Okay, if they conceive of it at all, it's like the person who says that we'll still be living on this island. They only see it in a geographical sense. They only see Britain in a geographical sense. And even then, they see it in a derogatory geographical sense. Oh, Britain's just a small island. Britain's just a small island on the edge of Europe. Britain's just a small island on the edge of Europe that's past its day. So even then, they are derogatory about Britain's island status. But they certainly don't think of it as a nation, and we addressed that matter in our very first Busting Indy Myths. But for us, Britain is most certainly a nation, and it's a nation created through time, from the start of time, building social and cultural links, building regal links, which we've just spoken about, and building, of course, political links with the Union of Parliaments in 1707, to the point where we are now sharing, that we have created a body which is sharing the same social and cultural blood vessels. And so what would happen if that political union was to sever is that you would be traumatizing that overall body. And we talk about these things in our magazine, Do More Together, when we speak about what it means to be British. What it means to be British. And also when we talk about how the United Kingdom is our great work of time, how it comes together through time, and the sorts of things that give it meaning today. So when people say, what is Britishness? You know, we always point them to this article, which helps to describe it in some considerable depth, I should add. So we want Britain to continue as a living organism. We don't just see it as some kind of a geographical or geological entity in the simplistic way that some of the Scottish nationalists see it. Okay, so the question is, how can we still be British when you have attacked that political and social and cultural union? And secondly, the absolute cheek of these people to say that we can still be British after separation, when right now the SNP is doing everything it can, even while we are still in the union, to destroy Britishness and our British identity. From taking the Union Jack off the SNP administration's buildings, only allowing the Union Jack to fly on SNP and Holyrood buildings once a year, to trying to destroy the British Transport Police because it's got the word British in it. Hitherto they've been unsuccessful at that, but goodness me, they tried for several years. So they have the nerve to tell us that we can still be British when they're doing everything they can to get rid of Britishness while we are still in the Union. Imagine what it would be like if, God forbid, we were to leave and the UK and its associated Britishness were to take a terrible hammer blow as a consequence of that. Imagine what they would get up to. Well, we don't actually have to imagine. That's the interesting thing, because thirdly, we know what happens. Okay, we know what happens when you have a revolution and you don't accept one of the identities. Because look at the example of the Republic of Ireland. Okay, and note the word Republic of Ireland. Okay, there's no crown there anymore. So they even got rid of that. What happened, in fact, in those cases where any kind of symbol of Britishness or association with Britishness was essentially driven out. Okay, so if you were pro-British, if you had pro-Crown sympathies, didn't matter if you were Catholic or Protestant. You quickly had to go along with the programme. And if you didn't go along with the programme, then you had to keep your head down and you had to shut up. And if you didn't want to keep your head down and shut up, then you had to leave. And if you didn't want to leave, then you got burnt out of house and home, or worse. So, we know that when revolutions happen, the losing side doesn't necessarily get treated particularly well. We've seen it in our own islands in recent memory. So why do the Scottish nationalists pretend that we can still be British? Or they're going to allow us still to be British if there was separation? Well, they're doing that simply because they want to lull us into a false sense of security, a false sense of confidence that, nothing's going to change, everything is going to be okay. Well, don't fall for it, because if there was such a catastrophe as separation, then the a significant element of the Nationalist Brigade would not allow us to continue to be British, and it would get very difficult for us to actually try to maintain our sense of identity and culture, and eventually it would just kind of die out, and that is what would happen. So don't imagine that we can still be British after separation, because there will be lots of people trying to do their darndest to ensure that we can't express our identity. So what can we do in the meantime? Well, what we can do in the meantime is, as we always do, is to keep the British end up, keep the red, white and blue flying high, and keep asserting positive things about the United Kingdom on a regular basis. Because if you don't assert positive things about the nation on a regular basis, then the nation just gets lost to memory, and it eventually just dies out naturally anyway. And that's what our magazine Do More Together is about. We're emphasizing that a lot. As we say here, we quote Neil Oliver: "Great Britain has been here so long it can be easy to think it just happened, a work of nature like a mountain or an ancient tree. The truth is it was ever a fragile thing. Union is a dream shared by a people and kept real only by their imagination and conviction. If we neglect to maintain it, the temple will fall. All of it will be destroyed, and so the work of centuries will be undone." That is to say, as we add here, a nation is kept alive by those who believe in it, and each generation must make it live as a real thing. Okay, that was Busting Indie Myths Part 9. Hope you enjoyed that. By the end of the year, we're going to have a big series here of Busting Indie Myths, which will then convert into either a magazine or a book in the fullness of time. In the fullness of time. Stephen says, stress is what some of us have from the nationalists. Perhaps we should call it a stressorendum. Isn't it just? They're hoping to wear us down. They're hoping to wear us down with just this constant obsession. But we're stronger than that, folks. We're stronger than that. Frankie says, the so-called Scottish nationalists are not noble freedom fighters. They're naive fools who threaten the UK's security and stability. That's for sure. They threaten the UK's security and stability. Michael wonders just how, and says it was never imagined that 300 years later, after the Union of Parliaments, the SNP would try to split our union apart without understanding the ties that bind. The ties that bind. That's another good phrase, isn't it? That's what we might call this program, the ties that bind. We're always looking for good phrases to call the program when we post it up again on YouTube and things like that. So we'll call this one the ties that bind, I think. So Yvonne says, does the inherited wealth rule not apply to the globalists and elites? Inherited wealth's an interesting one. Some people think that it's unfair to inherit wealth, some of the more socialist minded people, and that's why they came up with the concept of inheritance tax, because it was a deliberate attempt to, in their view, the people who came up with it, it was a deliberate attempt to, I think it was Karl Marx who actually came up with it. I think he wrote it into the Communist Manifesto, the importance of an inheritance tax in order to ensure that wealth wouldn't get passed down in order to ensure that you wouldn't have a sort of a class of people who were benefiting from their parents' wealth. I'm not so sure that that's a good idea at all. But I can follow the logic of it, but it should be a bare minimum. I think inheritance tax should be a bare minimum, because otherwise you can just wipe somebody out and wipe out everything. Good evening to Michael. Kevin has an interesting point there. He says, we can agree that the UK is a unitary state, but I would like to see more representation for the Cornish as the forgotten home nation. That's an interesting point. How would you suggest that they were represented, and where would they be represented, Kevin? Cornwall's certainly a beautiful part of the country, no question about that. Kiyoshika Washi says, I'll have to read that. I'm interested in Britishness. Frankie says, the Union says an independence vote next year would be exactly what Mr. Putin would want, as it would distract the UK government's attention from foreign policy issues. Isn't that so true? Certainly Putin, whatever one may think of him, will be quite happy to see the United Kingdom fracturing. The United Kingdom is, of course, one of the major world powers. It would be very, very pleasing for the nation's enemies to see it break up, because if that were to happen, then it actually would ensure that Britain would no longer be a powerful presence on the world stage. I mean, what would there be at the end of the day? It would just be four different smaller countries. We'd just be back to where we were back in the when England was overwhelmingly dominant on these islands, but without any benefits as a consequence of that. Paul says that the SNP don't believe in Britain, that's for sure, yet they get outraged if the British government try to limit the numbers of people coming here. That's true, isn't it? Mark's talking about places that people that are being criticised because of so-called links to slavery, when in fact these links are very tenuous indeed. Yes, indeed. Well, what do you mean there, Adam, when you say Cornwall is perhaps the only country to have a Catalonia-style culture? Interesting point of view. Now, the question is, do we have a winner? We have a winner. Fantastic. Robert. Boom. Robert. Well done. Robert Cairns is going to be the happy recipient of this tin of sweets, which will be winging its way to you, Robert, tomorrow. Thanks for that. And the answer was, we asked, at what battle did Ensign Ewart get the French standard, win the French standard off the French and take it away as a battle, as a piece of battle glory? And the answer was, of course, the Battle of Waterloo. Well done, Robert. Well done, Robert. We've got time for a funny tweet time. Okay, funny tweet time. And this is a picture of, would you believe, wait till you see this, right? That's the new cycle lane in Leith Walk. Now, whoever did that, right, they had one job. They had one job to build that cycle lane, and they've got an arrow pointing directly to what looks like a lamppost, which is stuck precisely in the middle of the cycle lane. Now, no doubt they'll remove it in future, but I did think that summed up in many ways the SNP's approach to administering Scotland. Isn't it just basically head this way on your bike for a concussion? Edinburgh's SNP's council has managed to deliver a new bike lane in Leith Walk, which is more dangerous at the moment than the actual road. Okay. Good stuff. AR Entertainment says, congrats, Robert. Kevin's been placing Union Jack stickers on top of Yes Cymru stickers up and down the local high street. Good for you. That's what you want to do. That's what you want to do. Tommy says, congrats, Robert. And Debbie says, congrats, Robert. Stephen says, well done, Robert. The sweets are tasty. And Adam says, congrats. Good, folks. Well, always remember the wee book for the Union, folks. We've got so much good stuff now that's just building up. We've got a wee book for the Union, and we've got these magazines now, which are just like such bang on magazines. I mean, you know, that's Union Heart, special collector's edition. That's a 20-pager. That's available at our shop. And the 40-pager, Do More Together, is also available in our shop. And of course, they're free to everybody who is a monthly donor. If you're a monthly donor, you just have to request a copy and we will send it straight to you. Great stuff. Thank you to everybody who's come in today on TikTok. Thank you. Misanthropes 1960 says, that's exactly how slapdash the SNP are. Aren't they just? Slapdash, that's a good phrase. That's a good phrase. Good. So, we'll be here next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. Thank you to everybody who comments. A lot of good comments coming in tonight. And thank you to everybody on Twitter, on TikTok, and on Facebook. And on YouTube. And on YouTube as well. So folks, we'll see you next week. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the Queen. See you next week.